poor girl calls her boss Satan in disguise, unaware the billionaire CEO is right behind her, and falling in love. Some nights, the past doesn't knock, it slips in like wind under a door. I didn't marry him for love. I married him because I had no choice. His voice was cold, his eyes never lingered, and the ring on my finger was just part of a contract. I thought he was just another heartless billionaire trying to escape a marriage of convenience. I didn't know he was the boy I once gave everything for. The one I called Jace. The one I gave up adoption for. The one I whispered to under a quilt in a broken orphanage bed. One day, if you ever get out of here, come find me. But 20 years passed. And now, I call him Sir, while he stands behind me in boardrooms, listening silently, as I complain about the cold-hearted CEO who, unknowingly, is already my husband, thy wife he never recognized. Charleston never really forgets. The rain clings to the cobblestones like memory, pooling in the cracks of a city that knows too much about love and loss. Susie Carter stood beneath the courthouse awning, hair soaked, fingers trembling as she pressed her name onto the line that read, Spouse. No flowers, no vows, just ink and obligation. Inside, the clerk barely looked up. You'll get the official copy in the mail, she said, stapling the temporary license like it was a car title. And beside Susie stood a man she'd never really met, Ethan Whitaker. He was taller than she expected, the kind of man who made space go quiet when he walked in. Black coat, no umbrella. Sharp jaw, unreadable eyes. The richest man in South Carolina tech, and colder than the rain falling between them. This is just business, he'd said that morning, voice flat. My grandfather's inheritance is tied to a family clause. I need a wife by tonight. You need the surgery money. That was it. No affection, no explanation for why he chose her. Just a quiet wire transfer for $200,000, 0 cents. And the sound of her mother's hospital monitor slowing to a safer rhythm. Susie hadn't asked for more. She was used to being overlooked. Raised in the foster system, passed from town to town, she'd learned young that the world didn't stop for girls like her. Her only family now? Eleanor Carter wasn't even blood. But she was warmth, she was hope, she was all Susie had. They stepped out into the drizzle. He didn't offer her a coat. She didn't ask. Later that night, the apartment he assigned her felt more like a museum, all glass, chrome, and silence. She left her suitcase by the door and walked barefoot. Susie Carter, age 26, secretly married. Not for love, not for comfort, just for survival. She thought about what to text her mom, who was still recovering post-op. She typed, "Everything's going to be okay now." But then deleted it. It sounded too much like a lie. Across town, Ethan sat alone in a mahogany-paneled office. His assistant left a file on his desk. Susie Carter, background check? He didn't open it. He didn't need to. He already knew. Her voice. Her eyes. The way she chewed the inside of her cheek when she was nervous. It was all too familiar. Because he'd known her once, a long time ago. Back when she was just Susu, the girl who gave up her own adoption so he could be taken in first. He still remembered the night she whispered to him through the orphanage bars. "I hope whoever takes you in lets you keep your name." They were just kids then, but her voice stayed with him. Through boarding school, through grief, through empire. He searched for her for years, but orphanages burned down, records vanish, and Susu was a nickname carried by too many forgotten girls. And now she stood in front of him, married to him yet still so far away. She didn't recognize him, or maybe she'd simply forgotten. He wasn't sure which hurt more. At work the next day, she showed up early, buttoned up, quiet, ready to take on the role of secretary to the CEO. No one at Whitestone Enterprises knew about the marriage. That was part of the deal. But before the morning meeting, she vented to a colleague near the coffee machine. "I say Ethan Whitaker is made of stone. I think that's generous. The man doesn't even blink." She didn't see him standing behind her. He said nothing, just walked away. And somehow, for the first time in 20 years, he smiled. Chapter 1. the marriage that wasn't real. The first morning, as Mrs. Ethan Whitaker began with cold floors and colder silence. Susie Carter had never stayed in a penthouse before. The Charleston skyline wrapped itself around the living room like a postcard, all sunrise and antique rooftops. But beauty, she learned, didn't always mean warmth. The place felt untouched, unlived in, like a showroom version of someone else's life. She padded barefoot toward the kitchen, unsure whether she was allowed to touch anything. Even the faucet gleamed too much. There was a note on the counter in clean, masculine handwriting. "I'll be out until late. Don't wait up." "No thank you. No welcome." Just a note, like she was the help, not his wife. Susie pressed her palm to the marble island, exhaled, and stared out the window. The truth was simple. This wasn't a marriage. It was a transaction, a contract signed in ink and desperation. And yet, last night, as they'd stood in front of the judge, there'd been a moment, brief, blinking, where Ethan looked at her like he knew something she didn't. A hesitation in his signature, a breath held too long. But that maybe she imagined that. That she did that sometimes, filled silences with maybes. Downstairs, the Whitestone car was waiting for her at exactly 8:30 a.m. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitaker," the driver said with a polite nod. His name was Daniel, mid-40s, with a kind smile that felt out of place next to the black Cadillac. "Susie," she replied softly, settling into the leather seat. He said nothing, but she saw the flicker of surprise in the rearview mirror. At Whitestone Enterprises, the security gate let her through before she even said her name. Her badge was waiting, her position listed, executive assistant to the CEO. Susie adjusted the collar of her thrift store blazer and stepped into. It was all steel and glass, modern and brilliant, like Ethan himself. Men in pressed suits and women in designer heels walked briskly past her. She kept her eyes down and headed to the 30th floor. "Miss Carter?" someone called. She turned. A tall, lean woman with sharp cheekbones and a tight bun stood near the reception desk. "Heather Kane," the woman said, offering a handshake. "Chief Strategy Officer. We weren't told the new assistant was starting today." "I got a last-minute offer," Susie said, trying not to fidget. Heather's eyes scanned her up and down, the way someone might size up a stray dog left at the front gate. "Well," she said coolly, "the CEO's office is that way. Good luck." The words were polite, the tone anything but. Inside the glass-walled office, Susie moved carefully. The view was breathtaking. Charleston Harbor stretched out in the distance, framed by golden light. She didn't sit. She just stood by the large oak desk, taking it all in. Her hands brushed over a collection of ceramic items on the shelf, clean lines, soft glazing. One of them was a mug, handmade, slightly imperfect, like it had been shaped by someone young. She blinked. It was almost identical to one she'd kept under her bed as a girl, a gift from Jace, the boy at the orphanage who once told her, "Someday I'll make you a whole set of these, one for every day we're apart." Fingers trembled. Coincidence, she thought. Just coincidence. "Admiring my terrible high school pottery?" a voice said behind her. Susie jumped, turning sharply. Ethan stood in the doorway, coffee in hand, black coat over his arm. He didn't smile. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "It's fine," he said, walking past her. "Just don't drink out of it. The glaze is likely toxic." He set his coffee down and opened his laptop. For a full minute, silence sat thick between them. "Your desk is outside," he said without looking up. "Of course," she said. "Mr. Whitaker." "Ethan," he corrected softly. "You're my secretary now. No need for formality." She nodded, unsure what to say. But before she stepped away, he added quietly, "Thank you for last night." It was so quiet she almost missed it. She turned, startled, but he didn't look at her. He just stared out the window, like he didn't know how to say more. That afternoon, she brought him his coffee black, no sugar, just like the assistant downstairs told her. When she knocked, he didn't answer. The door was slightly ajar, so she stepped in. He was standing by the window again, lost in thought. As she placed the cup down, she murmured mostly to herself, "A little warmth wouldn't kill you, you know." He turned slowly. "Why did you say?" Susie's heart dropped, her face flushed. I just meant nothing. I was just thinking out loud." His lips twitched, something between a smirk and surprise. "You talk to yourself often?" "Only when I'm trying not to scream," she blurted, and then immediately regretted it. Ethan looked at her, really looked, and for the first time she felt it. A crack. Not in his face, not in the air, but in him. That night, Susie lay in the guest room of the penthouse, listening to the storm outside. She didn't turn the lights off, didn't dare close her eyes. This wasn't a home. This wasn't a husband. This was a place to wait, a place to disappear. But still, the image wouldn't leave her mind. The boy from the orphanage, the mug he made, the look in Ethan's eyes when he said thank you, and a question aching behind her ribs. Could it be him? Chapter 2. The woman he hired, the girl he forgot. The elevator to the 30th floor was cold, too cold for a Charleston spring morning. Susie Carter stood with her arms crossed, feeling the air press against her like silence in a too big room. Every floor ding reminded her she didn't belong here. Not in the heels that pinched, not in the borrowed blazer. Not in the glass palace built by the man whose name now matched hers on paper. Ethan Whitaker. The name sounded too polished, too high above her to be real, but every morning since the courthouse she'd shown up to his company, quietly, precisely, anonymously. No one knew that she was his wife, that she slept 3 doors down from the CEO. He'd insisted on secrecy. "Well, until the inheritance passes," he'd said. Susie had nodded. What else could she do? Heather Kane was waiting outside the office again, crisp, white blouse, pencil skirt, designer heels. Susie could practically feel the judgment in her stare. "You're early," Heather said, voice wrapped in faux professionalism. "Stupid," Susie replied quietly. Heather's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Just checking in on the CEO's schedule. You know, real assistants do more than drop off coffee." Susie nodded. "Then I'll try harder." Heather blinked, surprised by the calm. Susie had learned long ago it's better to give people nothing to push against. At 9:01, Ethan entered. Black coat, cuff sleeves, a leather briefcase in hand. He didn't speak to either woman, just nodded once, eyes barely grazing Susie's face before disappearing into his office. Heather lingered a beat too long, as if expecting an invitation. When it didn't come, she turned on her heel. Susie exhaled slowly and turned back to her monitor. By noon, the buzz around the office grew louder. A new deal, a big one, was being negotiated with a tech partner in Atlanta. It was Susie's job to prep the boardroom. She walked in, balancing a laptop, a printout of presentation slides, and her nervous heartbeat. The long mahogany table gleamed under overhead lights. At the far end, Ethan, flipping through contracts in silence. "You can leave them on the left," he said, not looking up. Susie paused. "There's a typo on slide 7. The quarterly forecast says 2022 instead of 2023. But that got his attention. He glanced up, met her eyes. "I'll have the analyst fix it." "I already did," she said, "and reprinted it." He blinked. "I used to temp in accounting. You learn fast when you're disposable." Something in his face shifted, not quite a smile, but something warmer than anything she'd seen since the day they met. "You're not disposable," he said quietly. Susie froze. "Here," he added, then looked away. "You can go." But as she turned, he added one last line. "I thank you. Again." Later that afternoon, she brought him his usual black coffee, exactly 180 def. When she stepped inside, Ethan was pacing. "Are you all right?" she asked before thinking. "I'm fine." He hesitated. Just trying to remember something. She stayed silent. He turned to her, eyes darker than usual. Was a girl, he said, voice low. Before. She had this habit of biting her lower lip when she was scared, and she'd always give up her food for someone else, even if she was hungry. Susie's hands clenched around the mug. She called me Jace, he said. Her breath caught. He looked at her like he was trying to see through her. I've been trying to find her for years, he said. I thought maybe... Never mind. He turned away. And just like that, the moment passed. That night, Susie stared at her own reflection in the bathroom mirror. He's looking for me, she thought. And I'm already standing in front of him. She touched the scar beneath her collarbone, the one she got falling off the orphanage bunk bed trying to give Jace his birthday card. He never saw it. He left before sunrise the next morning. Adopted. And she stayed behind. Let him go, she whispered aloud. He's not that boy anymore. But a tiny voice inside her whispered back. What if he is? At Whitestone the next morning, the company buzzed with preparation for the quarterly board presentation. Heather seemed to double her efforts to accidentally bump into Ethan. Susie watched silently. She didn't fight. She didn't need to. That afternoon, a courier delivered a box. Inside, a handmade ceramic mug, soft blue, glazed unevenly, on the bottom, carved initials, J. Jones. There was no note. Susie sat alone at her desk, cradling the mug with shaking hands. He remembered. Chapter 3, The Name That Broke Him. A name slipped from someone else's mouth. That was the worst part. Susie didn't even hear it at first. She was heading back from the break room, clutching a half-warmed tea and trying not to trip over her own shoes. The hallway outside the executive floor was unusually busy. Interns pacing, voices tangled with tech talk. Then, near the stairwell, a passing junior developer said it. Hey, Susu, can you send me the new forecast slides later? Casual, playful, innocent. But Ethan Whitaker heard it. He was stepping out of a conference room across the hall, suit jacket draped over one shoulder, looking every inch the calm, unshakable CEO. Until that name cracked across the air like a fault line. Susu. It stopped him mid-step. His breath caught. Time slowed. He hadn't heard that name in 20 years, not out loud, not since a little girl whispered it to him on the last night they shared the same broken-down orphanage bed. The same night she'd let go of her one chance to leave so he could go instead. He turned. Susie had paused, her back to him, fingers tightening slightly around her mug. She didn't correct the intern. She didn't laugh. She just kept walking. As if it wasn't the first time she'd heard it. That night, Ethan stood in his private study, the one no one was allowed in. Not even his assistant, not even his mother when she was still alive. The room was small, not like the rest of the penthouse, just wood shelves and old boxes relics from a time he never revisited. Till now. He opened a tattered folder. Inside were fragments of memory, a faded drawing of a bluebird, a postcard from an orphanage in Nashville, a child's paper ring made from ribbon, and a Polaroid, yellowing at the edges. 2 children, a boy and a girl, arms around each other, tooth gaps, crooked smiles. On the back, in childish handwriting, Jace, from Susu, so you don't forget me. His hand trembled. He'd never stopped looking. But he hadn't thought, couldn't have imagined that she was right in front of him, that she'd married him, worked beside him, slept 3 doors down, and didn't recognize him at all. The next morning, Susie stepped into the office early. She hadn't slept. Her dreams were full of clay mugs and hands that once shielded her from thunder at night. She set down her bag and pulled up her emails. Another meeting, another logistics report. Another morning pretending her world hadn't just started shaking. The ceramic mug sat on her desk, soft blue, initials still damp underneath the glaze. Jeff. Jace. She hadn't heard that name in years either, not since she whispered it into Her heart whispered what her mind refused to say. What if it's him? At 10:15, Ethan called her into his office. His tone was even, professional. But his eyes were searching. "I need you to review the speaking points for the board luncheon," he said, sliding a folder across the desk. She nodded, but didn't reach for it. Silence pulsed between them. "Someone called you Susu yesterday," he said quietly. "Why?" Susie blinked. "Why that?" she said, forcing a light tone. "Just an old nickname from when I was in foster care." His face didn't change, but she could feel something shift, as if the floor beneath both of them cracked a little wider. "Where were you raised?" he asked. She hesitated. "A few places," she said. "Mostly Tennessee. There was one home I remember best. It had red swings and a leaky roof. We used to trade snacks like currency." She smiled faintly, not looking at him. His breath hitched. "Did you ever know a boy named Jace?" Her eyes met his. For a heartbeat, the air between them stilled. But she shook her head gently. "No, doesn't ring a bell." And just like that, the truth shattered inside him. Not because she lied, but because she didn't remember. That evening, Ethan drove alone. No security, no assistant, just back roads and memory. He ended up outside a crumbling brick building on the edge of the city, what used to be St. Augustine's group home. The swing set was gone, the playground was weeds and silence, but the wind still smelled like rain and wood smoke and history. He stood in front of the rusted gate and whispered, "Susu." He'd whispered it 100 times over the years. In boardrooms, in dreams. In every moment he looked out across a crowd and hoped someone would turn around. But she never did. Not until now. And now she was next to him, but miles away. Susie didn't eat dinner that night. She sat on the couch, knees pulled up, rereading an old journal from the year she turned 7. She found one line circled in pink crayon. "Someday, I'll find Jace, and he'll still like peanut butter and no crusts." She didn't know if she should laugh or cry. Part of her still clung to the fantasy that Jace had turned into someone soft and safe. Not cold, not silent. Not like Ethan. But then again, Ethan had saved her mother, given her a place to live, listened when she didn't know he was listening, given her a mug that looked exactly like the one Jace once made her, under a tree behind the orphanage. And the way he'd looked at her that brief second when she said the orphanage had red swings, his breath had caught. Like he'd remembered too. In bed that night, Susie didn't sleep. She whispered into the dark, "Don't you remember me, Jace?" In another room, Ethan stood by the window, eyes on the rain, and whispered back, though no one heard. Every day. Chapter 4. A birthday, a memory, a mistake. Charleston spring came gently that year, as if the city itself had decided to take a breath. The boardroom at Whitestone was transformed, not with flowers or confetti, but with crystal glasses and a tray of hand-delivered pastries, a silent celebration for the company's founding date. Internally, it was simply called the company's birthday. The founding partners, long retired, still sent handwritten notes, and Ethan, who claimed to hate all things sentimental, still made sure everyone got cake. Susie stood quietly by the kitchenette, watching from a distance. Heather Kane, of course, stood right by Ethan's side, glass of champagne in hand, laughing at something he hadn't really said. Susie looked away. She didn't drink, not since her mother's collapse. Somehow, even orange juice felt too celebratory these days. She turned to leave when she heard Ethan call out softly, "Secretary Carter, could I see you in my office?" It was the tone he used when he didn't want anyone else to hear what he really meant. She followed him into the office, the sound of laughter fading behind the heavy glass door. Ethan didn't sit. Instead, he walked to the small cabinet near the corner. From it, he pulled out a box. Long, narrow, wrapped in brown paper. "I was going to give this to someone else," he said. He didn't look at her. while something tells me it was never meant for them. He held it out. Susie hesitated. What is it? Open it? Inside was a small ceramic figure, rough, imperfect, shaped like a bluebird in flight. It was glazed in soft white, with pale blue speckles across the wings. Her breath caught. I had one just like this, when I was little. He met her eyes. I know. And didn't explain. He just walked to the window, as if the sky could answer for him. Someone once gave it to me, he said. She said it was for luck. She said birds always remember where home is. Susie closed the box, gently. It was me, she said before she could stop herself. Ethan turned slowly. Her voice was barely a whisper. I made one just like this for a boy, a long time ago. At St. Augustine's. His name was Jace, he finished. She froze. You remember? She asked. I never forgot, he said, but you did. Susie's eyes filled, but no tears fell. I didn't forget. I just never thought it could be you. She looked down at the ceramic bird. I made another one, she said, but I left it behind when they moved me. I thought maybe you'd find it. I thought maybe you'd come back. I tried, Ethan said. They closed the home, changed the name. I looked for years. Every Susie, He hesitated. Why, I didn't expect you to be standing in front of me, signing my name on a marriage license. They stood in silence, both remembering the same winter night, the same shared blanket, the same broken lullaby hummed from one bunk to the other. But he hadn't imagined it. Neither had she. You gave me your adoption spot, he said. You shouldn't have. I wanted you to have it, she replied. You were always the brave one, the kind one. I was just a scared boy, Ethan said. I was a girl who knew how to disappear. There was a knock. Heather Kane's voice cut through like glass. Your guests are asking for you. He didn't answer. Susie gently stepped back. I should go, she said. But as she reached for the door, he said something so quietly she nearly missed it. You remembered the bird, but not me. She turned, heart twisting. I remembered the feeling, she said. I just didn't think it could survive in someone like you. And then she left. That night, Susie walked the Charleston waterfront alone. The salt wind tangled her hair. The bench beneath her was cold, but the sky above the harbor shimmered with the faint glow of spring stars. She held the bird in her hand. She remembered everything now. The way Jace used to cup his palms around her ears when thunder clapped. The way he gave her the last bite of peanut butter bread every single time. The way he once said, "If I ever make it out..." And he did. He had. And she just hadn't seen it. Across the city, Ethan sat alone in his townhouse. The ceramic bird sat on the shelf, untouched. And beside it, an old box. He reached in and pulled out a yellowing envelope. Inside was a child's drawing. 2 stick figures, one with long hair, one with messy scribbles for shoes. Beneath, written in pink crayon, Jason Susu, always. In the silence of separate rooms, they both remembered. And they both wondered if too much time had passed. Or if the name that broke them might be the very thing that saved them. Chapter 5. The Confession in the Hospital Room. The smell of antiseptic had a way of humbling a person. Susie Carter stood by the window in room 612 of Charleston General, hands curled around a paper cup of lukewarm tea. Her mother Eleanor Carter lay asleep, cheeks hollowed but peaceful, her gray curls tucked into a surgical. The doctor said the transplant had gone well. Another 3 days and she might go home. And Susie hadn't slept much. She hadn't eaten more than a few crackers since yesterday morning. But her feet refused to move, as if by standing still she could will the world not to change again. Behind her, the door clicked open. She didn't have to turn around to know who it was. Ethan Whitaker walked in quietly, carrying a small bouquet of pale yellow tulips and a bag from the corner bakery Susie liked. He didn't say anything right away. He just set the flowers on the windowsill, just beneath the sunlight. "She's resting," Susie said, her voice flat from fatigue. "I called the nurse," Ethan said. "They said she's stable." Susie nodded. He glanced at the bed, then back at her. "You've been here all night?" "I didn't want her to wake up alone." Ethan took a slow breath. "You didn't have to stay." She looked at him, then really looked. The way the soft light caught the lines in his face, the quiet in his eyes, the way he hadn't stopped carrying her burdens even when she tried to push him out. And then, as if something inside her cracked, she whispered, "Why are you doing this, Ethan?" He didn't flinch. He just looked down at his hands. "The same reason I married you," he said. "To protect someone I couldn't lose." Susie blinked. "Why, you don't even," she started. "I remember everything," he said. The room went still. Susie's fingers tightened around the paper cup. "You knew." "I knew before the marriage. I just wasn't sure you were her." "When were you sure?" He stepped closer, just enough that the breath between them grew warmer. "The way you fold your receipts before throwing them away. The way you still mouth the words to songs even when you don't realize it. And the way you held your mother's hand, exactly how you used to hold mine when you were scared." Susie turned away. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I thought I was imagining it," he said. "Because I wasn't sure if you'd want the truth." Silence filled the space between heartbeats. Then Susie whispered, "I waited for you." She didn't know she was going to say it until the words came out. "I waited," she said again, tears finally tracing the corners of her cheeks. "Every year I thought maybe you'd come back." Ethan's voice cracked. "I tried." "I know," she wiped her eyes. "But knowing you were out there, that was the only thing that kept me going. And when you didn't come, I told myself it didn't matter, that it was a dream, that maybe I made you up." "You didn't," he said, stepping forward now. "You didn't make any of it up." Her breath hitched. "Do you remember the mug?" she asked. "The one I made you? You said it looked like a lopsided lemon." Ethan smiled. "I still have it. The glaze is peeling, but it's in my closet, right next to the ribbon ring." Susie let out a small, broken laugh. And then she looked at him. "I don't know what we are now, Ethan." But this marriage? It was just supposed to be a contract." Ethan stepped closer. His voice was quiet, almost reverent. "But was it? Not for me." Susie looked down at her hands. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" He hesitated. "Because I didn't think I deserved the second chance." The hospital room buzzed faintly with distant monitors. Somewhere in the hallway, a nurse was laughing softly. But inside this room, the only thing that mattered was the way Susie looked up at him, tear-streaked, trembling, and said, "I think I was afraid too, that if I remembered you, I'd lose you again." Ethan reached for her hand. He didn't force it, just held it there, waiting. And finally, gently, she placed her fingers in his. Eleanor stirred then. Her eyes fluttered open. "Susie?" Susie turned, wiping her eyes. "I'm right here, Mama." Eleanor blinked, smiling faintly. Then she looked past Susie. "Is that the young man from the bakery?" Susie laughed through her tears. "Sort of." Ethan stepped forward. "It's nice to see you awake, ma'am." Eleanor smiled. "My daughter's stubborn, but she's good at spotting what matters." She drifted back to sleep, hand curled in the blanket. That night, as they left the hospital together, Ethan didn't offer the car. They just walked to Charleston's streetlights, past quiet storefronts and the smell of salt from the harbor. "You remember that promise you made me?" Susie asked. He turned to her. "Which one?" "If you made it out, you'd come back for me." He nodded. "I came back." You did, she said softly. You just wore better shoes this time. He chuckled. Susie stopped at the corner, facing him beneath the glow of a street lamp. Thank you for saving her. Thank you for saving me first. And in that moment, no contracts, no paperwork, no pretense. Something real passed between them. A boy and a girl. A man and a woman. No longer strangers, no longer lost. Just found. Chapter 6. The girl who wasn't a secret anymore. The first time Ethan reached for her hand in public, it wasn't in a ballroom. It was in the elevator. Just the two of them. The chrome doors had barely shut behind them. A silence stretched thick as the buttons glowed floor by floor. Susie Carter was gripping her file folder like a lifeline. Her breath came shallower than usual. It had been 3 days since their moment in the hospital. 3 days since everything broke open. 3 days of nothing. No words, no calls, no change. Ethan had returned to being the cold CEO. She had returned to being the assistant. Till that moment. He didn't speak, just reached out and slid his fingers gently over hers. Her pulse jumped. She didn't pull away. And neither of them looked at each other until the elevator dinged at floor 30. The doors opened. People waited. But for a single breath, no one moved. Then Ethan said softly, "We're not hiding anymore." That morning's staff meeting was unusually tense. Heather Kane sat straighter than usual, clearly sensing a shift. She'd been circling like a hawk lately, throwing little digs about secrecies getting above their station and favoritism with no merit. She thought she was clever. But as the team assembled around the glass conference table, Ethan entered with Susie at his side. And this time, he didn't step ahead of her. He let her walk in first. When the introductions were made, he didn't call her Ms. Carter. He said, "Susie will be co-presenting the strategic vision briefing with me this quarter." Murmurs floated through the room. Heather's eyes went wide. Someone tried to cover a cough. But Ethan wasn't done. He pulled out the chair beside his own, held it, waited for Susie to sit. And when she did, he laid a folder in front of her labeled, "Whitestone Enterprises Long-Term Partner Strategy, S. Carter." The air shifted. Everyone felt it. She wasn't just a secretary anymore. Later, in the break room, Heather cornered her. "You think one hospital visit earns you a seat at his table?" she hissed. Susie didn't respond at first. She just poured herself a cup of coffee. Then she turned. "No," she said, "but I think 20 years of survival, sacrifice, and knowing who he is beneath the silence probably does." Heather stared at her. Susie didn't blink. That afternoon, Susie found herself in the design department. Ethan had sent her to review a new product mock-up, a luxury smart speaker designed to resemble old Charleston brick homes. But what caught her attention wasn't the device. It was a piece of paper taped to a junior designer's wall, a sketch of a tiny ceramic bird flying upward. The caption, "Inspired by the CEO's childhood, gift from his muse." Susie's breath stilled. He stepped back. The ceramic bird had been hers, a gift from a girl with nothing to give, something she'd made at 7 years old with chipped paint and a dream she didn't understand yet. He kept it. He let it inspire an entire product line. That night, she stood in front of Ethan's office door and knocked. He opened it immediately, like he'd been waiting. "I saw the bird," she said. He didn't pretend to misunderstand. "You never were a secret," he told her. "Only a memory I was afraid to break." Susie took a step forward. "Why now?" she asked. "Why make it public?" Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into the top drawer of his desk and pulled out a small velvet box. "I was waiting for you to remember too." Inside the box was a ring, not diamonds, not gold. Handmade band, etched with the word, "To Sue?" Her breath caught. "You had this made?" "I had it made the day I hired you," he said, "just in case." She swallowed hard. I thought we were pretending, she whispered. So did I, he said. But then you walked into my life with your old shoes and chipped mug and your voice. And I didn't want to pretend anymore. 2 days later, Whitestone Enterprises held their annual spring gala. It was supposed to be an elegant, quiet affair, catered oysters, string quartet, garden lights strung from the magnolias. But the moment that stole the night came before the first toast. Ethan walked on stage, microphone in hand. And then to gasps and stares he held out his hand. Before we begin, he said, voice even but strong, I'd like to introduce someone. Susie froze in the back row. This is Susie Carter, he continued, my partner in strategy, my wife. And the only reason I'm still who I am. Silence. And then thunderous applause. People rose, some out of habit, some out of awe. Heather dropped her champagne flute. And Susie? She walked forward, heels silent on the flagstone, eyes never leaving his. When she reached him, Ethan didn't kiss her hand or pull her in. He just leaned close and whispered, so only she could hear. In more hiding, ever again. That night, Charleston held its breath as the two of them stood side by side beneath the magnolias. Not just a CEO and a secretary. Not a boy and a girl from nowhere. But a man and a woman who had finally stopped waiting. Chapter 7. The signature that changed everything. The legal envelope arrived on a Monday. Plain white, no return address, just her name neatly typed. Mrs. Susie Whitaker. Susie stood at the kitchen island, still wearing her rain-damp coat. The apartment was quiet except for the gentle clatter of ice in the freezer and the distant hum of Charleston traffic outside. She held the envelope for a long time before opening it. Inside, a postmarital contract nullification agreement. Signed on the bottom line. Ethan Whitaker. He was giving her a way out. No lawyers, no press, no clause about timing, just a single-page document and a handwritten note clipped to the top. When you still feel this was a mistake, you're free. No expectations, no pressure. She sat down slowly. They had come so far, from fake vows in a courthouse to whispered confessions in a hospital room, to that moment under the garden lights when he'd said no more hiding. And yet, here it was. Freedom. In ink. That afternoon, she walked to his office without an appointment. The receptionist started to protest, but Ethan looked up the moment she entered and stood. He knew why she was there. She held out the envelope. I read it, she said quietly. You signed it. I told you I would, he said, if it ever felt like a cage. Susie looked at him, all of him. The man who once built walls out of silence, the boy who once cried when she... And now the man who was giving her the chance to walk away. She placed the envelope on his desk. Slowly she uncapped a pen from his holder. And with one clean, certain motion, she tore the contract in half. Susie met his eyes. You've already signed the only contract that matters, she said. The day you took my mother's hand and said you'd take care of her like she was your own. Ethan looked stunned, but there was something else behind it. Something cracked wide open. Relief? Hope? Maybe even fear. He stepped around the desk slowly, as if approaching a moment he didn't want to startle. You're sure? He asked. Susie smiled. I'm done making you chase someone who never really left. Then her voice dropped. You can stop proving you love me. I already know. That night, they cooked together for the first time. The kitchen was a mess. Susie burnt the garlic bread. Ethan overcooked the salmon. They laughed. They spilled. They danced barefoot between burners. For the first time since the marriage, for the first time in years, it wasn't about obligation or repayment or the ache of the past. It was just them. Jason Thufu, a man and a woman choosing each other freely. Later, curled up on the couch beneath an old quilt from the market, Ethan traced his fingers over the fading scar on her collarbone. You got that climbing the window, didn't you? He murmured, trying to sneak out and give you your birthday card before the nuns caught me. You were always braver than me. Negotiation, she whispered. I just had more to lose. In the weeks that followed, everything changed and nothing did. They still worked together, still bickered over coffee temperatures and meeting times, still pretended, sometimes, that they weren't slowly becoming something neither had planned for. But now, when he reached for her hand, she didn't flinch. When he stayed late at the office, she waited up, and he kissed her forehead before bed. She leaned into it. And every day, when she passed the broken shred of that nullification letter framed in his office, she smiled. Because sometimes love isn't declared in vows. It's signed in silence, and torn in half when it matters most. Chapter 8. The day they finally said it. The morning Charleston fog drifted soft and silver across the harbor, coating everything in the kind of hush usually reserved for prayer or snowfall. Susie woke first. She lay still for a long while, listening to Ethan breathe beside her. Slow, steady, softer than anyone would expect from a man who once ruled his boardroom like a courtroom. She traced the curve of his shoulder with her eyes, not her fingers. They hadn't said the words. Not yet. They'd built a marriage on paperwork, broken it down with truth, and rebuilt it with choice. But the words still hung between them like the last unopened envelope in a drawer full of meaning. I love you. They both felt it, but neither had said it aloud. Not yet. Ethan stirred around 7:30. He always did, even on Sundays. But today, he didn't reach for his phone. Instead, he turned toward her, hair tousled, eyes still sleepy. You're watching me again, he murmured. Someone has to make sure you're not dreaming up new ways to control the stock market in your sleep. He chuckled softly, voice thick with morning rasp. Stay a while. So she did, wrapped in the warmth of covers and the quiet thrum of a life they were slowly learning to live together. Later they drove to Folly Beach. No suits, no press. Just a thermos of coffee, a half-smashed blueberry muffin, and the ocean licking the edges of their morning. Ethan wore a sweatshirt she didn't know he owned. She wore one of his. They walked in silence for a long time, until Susie finally said, I used to hate the ocean. He looked at her, surprised. Because it reminded me how big the world was, how easy it was to be forgotten. Ethan stopped walking. He didn't say anything for a beat. Then quietly, You were never forgotten. Susie turned toward the water, blinking hard. I used to dream that you'd come back for me, but the longer I waited, the smaller the dream became. I stopped expecting anyone to stay. Ethan stepped beside her, close but not touching. I didn't know how to say it back then, he said. To say what? He looked out over the horizon. I loved you. The wind caught the words, but not before she heard them. And when she turned, he was watching her. Carefully, unflinching. Not a businessman. A husband. Just a boy who had carried the weight of a name she gave him, who kept a bird she shaped in clay, who once promised to come back. He had. I never stopped, Ethan said, even when I forgot the sound of your voice, even when I thought I imagined you. I still... His throat caught. I love you. The world stilled. Not dramatically, not loudly, but in the way water stills when the tide shifts just slightly, undeniable, irreversible. Susie didn't speak right away. She just looked at him, eyes shining, and then she whispered, I was waiting for that. She stepped into him, hands slipping beneath his jacket, breath against his jaw. I love you too. The kiss that followed wasn't urgent. It wasn't cinematic, and was quiet. Real. The kind of kiss you remember, not for how it started, but for how long it stayed. That night, back at the apartment, She found something on the kitchen counter, a photo frame. Inside it, a Polaroid from decades ago, 2 kids sitting on the floor of a worn-out group home. He had a gap-toothed grin. She was holding a bird made of clay. Taped behind it, the note she'd written at 7. "I'll wait for you, even if you forget me." Susie turned to Ethan, who stood in the hallway, hands in his pockets. "I kept it," he said, "all these years." She walked to him, silent, pressed her forehead to his, and whispered, "I'm glad I never gave up." Some loves don't need to be declared in public or written in vows. Some loves are built in silence, finally spoken aloud, and when it's safe to stop running. Chapter 9. The Claws She Tore Apart. Rain slicked the windows of Whitestone Tower that morning, streaking the glass in uneven ribbons. It was the kind of spring storm Charleston was known for, sudden, unapologetic, and impossible to ignore. Susie sat in Ethan's office, staring at the contract on the table between them. 30 pages. One clause. That clause. She read it again. Should the marriage dissolve within 2 years, neither party shall disclose its existence, nature, or contractual terms to any media, affiliate, or entity associated with Whitestone Enterprises. Her name was printed beside his. Typed, neat, legal. She looked up at him. Ethan, her husband, her Jace. He hadn't signed the updated version yet, but she could tell by the way his shoulders sat stiff beneath his suit, he had every intention to. "You still want this?" she asked quietly. Ethan didn't speak for a long moment. Then, "It protects you." "No," she said, voice low but steady. "It protects you." He exhaled through his nose, turned to the window. His company. "The board still thinks our marriage was a merger move, if they knew it started as a transaction," Susie finished. "Yes, I remember." Her fingers curled over the edge of the document. "Why, it didn't stay one," she said. "You know that, I know that, and if we're still writing rules like it did, then what's the point?" He turned then, eyes serious, tired. "I spent years building this," he said. "Whitestone is more than a company. It's every piece of me I couldn't control as a kid. Every moment I thought I didn't belong anywhere." "I'm not asking you to destroy that," she said. "I'm asking you to stop hiding behind it." Silence pulsed between them. And then, with her eyes never leaving his, Susie reached for the red pen on his desk. She drew a slow, deliberate line through the clause. One stroke, one decision. And beneath it, she wrote, "No clause protects a love I'm not afraid of anymore." Ethan stared. Then he smiled. Not the half-curved CEO smirk she'd seen 100 times. A real one. The boy smile she remembered from the orphanage, the one that had chipped teeth and too much hope for someone who'd been through so much. He walked over to her, took the pen from her hand, and signed the bottom of the page. Without the clause. That evening, Heather Kane cornered her near the parking lot. Word of the updated contract had somehow gotten out. "You must be proud," Heather sneered. "You've won the CEO's heart and his empire." Susie turned calmly. "I didn't win anything," she said. "I loved him when there was nothing to gain, and he loved me long before I remembered." Heather's expression cracked. "You'll never belong in this world." Susie's voice stayed quiet. "Then I'll build a new one." The next day, Ethan stepped into a shareholders' meeting with Susie at his side. Not as an assistant, not as a ghost wife, but as the company's newly appointed head of strategic partnership. He didn't make a speech. He didn't explain himself. But as the slideshow behind him clicked into its opening frame, the first slide simply read, "Susie Carter Whitaker, the only partner I've ever needed." Some gasped, others clapped. One man whispered, "Fine." And from that moment on, no one dared question it again. That night, Susie found a note on her pillow. "You tore up a clause today, but you wrote something even stronger in its place." She smiled. slipped it into the drawer beside her old journal. And beneath it, she tucked the ribbon ring from the boy who once promised to come back. Because some contracts are written in ink, but the ones that matter are written in courage. Chapter 10. The letter he never sent. The attic in Ethan's grandfather's lake house hadn't been opened in years. Dust lay thick on the beams, the windows were clouded, time had frozen everything inside the leather trunk, the cigar box full of matchbooks, the crate of business ledgers from decades past, and one envelope. It was yellowed, sealed, tucked into the spine of a book titled Principles of Inheritance Law. Susie found it by accident. They were up there for spring cleaning, or that's what Ethan had said. She was reaching for a paint-stained quilt when the book fell open and the letter slid to the floor. It had her name on it. Not Susie. Not Mrs. Whitaker. Sue? Written in the handwriting she recognized from old birthday cards, scrawled and urgent. She looked up. Ethan? He was kneeling by a box of family photos, holding an old picture of his mother. And she held out the envelope. I think this is for me. He froze. Then slowly, gently, he took it and turned it over. His breath hitched. I wrote this, he said quietly, a long time ago. Susie watched him. I was 16. My grandfather had just told me that the orphanage burned down, that there were no surviving records, that you were probably adopted out under another name, maybe another state. He paused. I wrote this in case I ever found a way to She touched his arm. Why didn't you send it? He looked down. Because I was scared I'd already lost you. Later they sat by the lake. The sun was low, soft light curling around the edges of the dock. She opened the letter carefully, as if time might shatter it. The first lines made her eyes burn. Sue? If you're reading this, it means I found you again. Or maybe you found me. Or maybe I never sent this, and I'm just holding on to a ghost. She looked at him. He nodded, eyes glassy. You remember the night you gave up your chance to be adopted so I could leave? I remember the cold floor, your cracked voice, your little bird of clay. I've never stopped looking, not once. They told me to let it go, to start over, but you can't start over when someone never left your story to begin with. If you've forgotten me, I understand, but I never forgot you. If we ever meet again, I won't ask you to love me. I'll just thank you for saving me before anyone else ever did. Yours always if you want it. Jace. Susie folded the letter carefully, held it in her. The wind carried the sound of ducks along the shoreline. Someone laughed in a boat far off. The world kept turning. She whispered, I would have said yes. Ethan turned. To what? To love you. Even back then. She reached over and took his hand. I'm glad you waited. That night, she framed the letter. Not for the words, but for the memory of what had nearly been lost. It hung in the hallway outside their bedroom, beside the ceramic bird and a photo of two children who had once had nothing except each other. A few months later, Susie stood beside Ethan at the dedication of the Carter Whitaker home for foster youth. She wore a navy blue dress, her mother's silver bracelet, and the same smile she wore the day Ethan said no more hiding. Porters asked questions. One of them, a young intern, asked Susie, what gave you the idea to fund this place? Susie didn't look at the cameras. She looked at Ethan, then answered softly. A boy once told me that no matter how far you run, love will find you if you remember who you are. And in the end, that's all they ever did. Remembered and chose each other again. And again. And again. The life we built in silence. It didn't end with a grand wedding or a rooftop kiss. It ended, or maybe began, with groceries unpacked side by side on a Tuesday afternoon, with post-it notes stuck to the fridge that read, Home by 7, and pick up tulips if you pass by Market Street. At the quiet hum of a shared life. Susie didn't need the world to know she was the wife of a billionaire anymore. She needed to know he was hers, not because of a clause or a contract or a promise made in a courthouse when her hands were shaking, but because, in the simplest of ways, he had never left. And now neither would she. Ethan stopped chasing legacies. He stopped trying to fix the past by overbuilding the future. He started waking up to the sound of a woman humming in the kitchen, barefoot, in one of his old college sweatshirts. And that he learned was the sound of peace. They never told many people how it started. Not the fake vows, not the paperwork, not the silent ache of all those almost missed chances. But if you asked them, really asked, they would tell you. We married for the wrong reasons, and then stayed for every right one. One afternoon, years later, Susie walked into the Carter Whitaker home to visit a group of new foster kids. One of them, a quiet girl with her hoodie pulled tight, looked up and said, "Do people ever come back for you?" Susie sat beside her, smiled, and said, "Yes, but sometimes you come back for yourself first. Because love doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it walks into your life in silence, wearing a suit, offering you a contract you didn't ask for, and a home you never dared to believe you deserved. And sometimes, that's how it begins. Maybe you've been Susie. Maybe you've had to be strong, silent, and too smart to believe in love that forgets to show up. Or maybe you've been Ethan, too guarded to let anyone see how much it hurt when they left. Wherever you are, I hope this story reminded you that sometimes the ones meant for us don't find us because they're perfect. They find us because they remember, because they return, and because they choose us again and again. If this story moved you, share it. It's not for clicks, not for numbers, but because someone out there may need to believe that love, real love, doesn't need an audience. It only needs a heart that's ready to remember. And when they do, let them in.